Hi, this is Anil Bharti, and we are here at Spinnaker Summit in San Diego. And today we have with us DROdio. You are CEO of Armory. First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This is the second day of the event, and there have been a lot of sessions, a lot of keynotes. I'm putting you in a bit of tricky situation, but I'm going to ask you, which has been your favorite keynote or session today?
So today, this morning, Isaac Mascara, Armory's CTO, gave an incredible keynote that was also bookended by a number of engineering leaders at companies including Pinterest and New Relic and Snap and Discovery. These companies that are progressive companies doing software delivery at scale. And it was just really, really humbling to watch because this community has grown so quickly. I remember the first one was at Netflix headquarters and everybody fit in their auditorium, and now we have 500 people at this event. And I know in a decade we'll look back and we'll say, remember when everyone fit in the Hard Rock in San Diego? The thing that was especially just incredible to watch was when Isaac talked about what makes Spinnaker as a project special. And he really focused on the community. There's a really important aspect to the Spinnaker community because the infrastructure layer is innovating so quickly. It used to be the case that infrastructure was very static. I'm a big Global 2000 company. Maybe I was in a data center. Maybe I was running vSphere. Nothing really changed for decades. Now at the infrastructure level, there's a lot of innovation happening in the cloud. AWS and GCP and Azure and Pivotal and Oracle and Ali Cloud and Huawei Cloud and Tencent Cloud. And AWS isn't just AWS, it's EC2 and ECS and EKS and Fargate and Lambda and whatever they announce at reInvent. And so there's this fragmentation that's happening in the infrastructure layer that Global 2000 companies are just looking at and saying, how do I go from these very brittle paths to production into my data center, which I built myself and never really had to change. Now, how do I leverage the cloud? How do I leverage all this fragmentation and innovation happening? And the answer is an abstraction platform called Spinnaker. But Spinnaker, to be successful, needs to have a really strong community. The engineers from AWS and from Microsoft, from Google, from Pivotal are building the cloud drivers, which is the mapping layer between the infrastructure and Spinnaker. So the best engineers on the planet for AWS are building the roads into AWS for Spinnaker users. And so it's the community that makes Spinnaker very powerful and very special. And to watch that community celebrate and talk about the successes that it's having and really just bond as a group, it's just an incredible thing to see. So that's what's been really special, not just about this keynote, which was an example of that, but about this entire conference.
Right. And you have been involved with Spinnaker, for early on, and you're one of the, major, kind of vendors.
Yeah.
When we look at open source, there is either you build or you buy. Mm-hmm. Not everybody has either technical, in-house expertise, or not everybody wants to invest there. They want to put their value somewhere else.
Yeah.
That brings, vendors at a sweet spot. At the same time, you're also critical to the project, mm-hmm. because a project success is not just about you donated the code and you're done. Mm-hmm. The users, the users of open source, they don't, actually go back and contribute that much. Sometimes they just fork it internally, mm-hmm. they use it internally. You are the guys, because you are solving somebody's real problem. And then you cannot maintain your fork, because then you will have to push everything upstream.
Yeah.
So the first question that I have for you is, what role do vendors like Armory play in the sustenance of open source projects like Spinnaker?
Yeah, so there's a gentleman named Joseph Jacks who I think is doing some of the most forward-thinking pieces about this exact question. What does it mean to be a commercial open source company? His acronym is COS. This is a company that fundamentally would not exist without the project at its core. So for example, as GitHub is to Git, Armory is that company. We are building a platform, and we have Spinnaker at our core. We fundamentally would not exist without Spinnaker at our core. And as a cost company, we have a special set of stakeholders that we need to ensure the success of in order for us to be as successful as we can be, not just as a company, but in creating a movement. We literally have an opportunity to help the world innovate faster through code, through software delivery. And I don't think of Armory as just a vendor that's creating a company. I think of us as a part of a broader community that's changing the way that the world innovates. This is why we're doing 10-year founder vesting, the founders of Armory. We're here to build an enduring company and to build a movement. And so because we have these obligations to the broader community and not just to ourselves as Armory, it's very important that we put those resources into all of those parts. And Isaac actually showed an amazing slide this morning, which was this flywheel. The flywheel is, so there's actually a lot of business thinking around this flywheel effect. And I think the flywheel is especially significant and meaningful for cost companies, for commercial open source companies, because as a cost company, we can help to improve the open source project. Improving the open source project means that that project gets more users. And as that project gets more users, many of those users are going to be enterprise companies that are then going to deepen the community. And them deepening the community, which then leads to more features being open sourced, is a really important part of that flywheel. And so we encourage our customers to contribute to the open source project, to contribute innovation back. Spinnaker was created by Netflix, but Netflix chose to open source it to kickstart this flywheel, to make sure that the innovation that they were making inside of Netflix could be accessible by the world. And so, there's this concept that you embrace and extend, not fork Spinnaker. Netflix learned this through Asgard. Asgard was a previous project that companies were running 7 forks of Asgard inside companies. So we really believe in embrace and extend. So that's our philosophy. Armory is an enterprise distribution that extends the open source project. So we don't fork the project. We extend the open source project with a set of features that are used by Global 2000 companies, like a policy engine, like pipelines as code, certain integrations like Vault and Terraform. But we also are very, very, very focused on ensuring the success of the project. So for example, we have an employee, we call ourselves a tribe, so we have a tribal named Rosalind who wakes up every morning only thinking about how to ensure Spinnaker's success. That is her only role and job. And so she's a community marketing manager for Spinnaker, not for Armory's distribution, but for the project. I think that cost companies, if a cost company has a long-term view like we do, that it's important to make those investments across that entire flywheel to get it spinning. And so it's a lot different than making a proprietary company, because we have an opportunity to create this larger change in humanity around the way that we all innovate through software.
Right. I will, because I have been covering open source from the first day of my journalism career. When you say commercial open source, if you look at Red Hat, SUSE, Canonical, they are commercial open source. Mm-hmm. Why do you need a new name for that? Because I was talking to Chris Wright, who is the CTO of Red Hat, and he was talking about the commercializing of open source. And the thing that has changed, in early days of Richard Stallman's GNU GPL, people were working at night in their free time writing some code, which they will patch next week or next week. So there was no accountability. People were like, hey, you should be just thankful that you're using my open source code. Yeah. Today, 80% of open source developers are on payroll of big companies, whether it's Google or Red Hat or Armory or whatever. So that model has already changed. Commercialization has become a critical piece of open source. When I talked to Linus Torvalds or Greg Cash, even they said that we want selfish contributions. We don't want, charity.
Yep.
So why do you think that it's also up to you whether you want to get into a discussion or not?
Yeah.
Why do you want to find a new word like cost?
Yeah. So that's JJ's term. I'll let him defend that specific term. There's actually a whole Twitter debate going on about that right now as we speak. So if you're interested in that, you can join that debate. I'll just describe what's important to us as Armory. I think GitHub's a great example of a company that fundamentally wouldn't exist without Git at its core. But GitHub is a lot more than Git. GitHub is a lot more than just the open source project. And that really describes what we're doing with Armory. We actually don't usually talk about this publicly, but I'll be happy to do it now with you, which is that we really are thinking about this in a very expansive way. What we call Act 1 for Armory. So it's public today. When you go to our website, what you see is that we are Spinnaker at enterprise scale. We are Spinnaker for Global 2000, Fortune 500 companies that want to standardize the way they deliver value to the world with a platform like Spinnaker. But that's not why Armory exists. Armory exists, if you look at Netflix, what Spinnaker is inside of Netflix is not what Spinnaker is in open source. Netflix uses open source Spinnaker, but they have a lot of proprietary extensions that they've built on top of the open source project that they couldn't open source because Spinnaker is intelligent inside of Netflix. It plugs into all of their systems. Really what Armory is doing, the reason that Armory exists is to help the world innovate faster, to help the Global 2000 innovate faster. So the more technical way to say that is to automate and compress the entire software development lifecycle. We think it's ridiculous that it takes a month to go from idea to feature in production. You know, Netflix is able to ship software 7,000 times every day. So you look at a Global 2000 company that's shipping once a month, and you look at Netflix that's shipping 7,000 times a day. And by the way, that's become a meaningless metric for them. They don't even track that anymore because it's continuous. They're actually tracking pipeline executions. They're doing 150,000 pipeline executions a day. And you ask yourself, how is a company going to get from here to here? And you know, I spend my day talking to CIOs of Global 2000 companies. When I ask them, tell me about your SDLC, they can't even describe the SDLC inside their company. There are so many systems of record, so many vendors, so many fiefdoms inside their company that it is this opaque black box to them. It's as if the analogy would be that a manufacturing company is building a car with raw material coming in one end and a car coming out the other end, and they have no idea what the factory is happening inside that factory. So the reason Armory exists is to automate and compress the entire SDLC. We're doing that through an integration strategy. We believe that by unlocking the data that lives across the SDLC, we can use Spinnaker to make it actionable. So we are open sourcing a plugin framework, and then we are building integrations for APMs, for centralized logging, for alerting, for feature flagging, for change management, for CI, for repos, so that we can actually liberate the data that lives in each of those systems of record. It's ridiculous that that's not working together to help a company go from idea to feature in production. So Spinnaker is the platform, it's the engine at the core that we are making a very big bet on. We need to ensure Spinnaker's massive success to cement it as the de facto standard for cloud-native software delivery as a project. And over time, as Armory matures, we have then the opportunity to build a lot of integrations across the SDLC so that we can make those other tools that companies are using more valuable. We want to make Datadog more valuable, right? There's a Datadog integration to allow Datadog to power Canary deployments. So now Datadog is actually making your software delivery actionable. Datadog has become more valuable. Repeat that for Splunk and for PagerDuty and for ServiceNow or Jira or GitHub or whatever else you're using in your dev toolchain. And so because of that, we are a company that fundamentally would not exist without open source at the core, but we are a lot more than just the open source project.
I mean, if you look at any open source project, the base project, but that is only day one, day two, we have to. At the same time, when you bring in an open source project, you need a lot of integration with, it could be billing, it could be a lot of things, So are you going to build all of that? No, somebody has to build. So people frown at that idea, but I think those are the people who actually don't use any open source. But other than pure open source model that Red Hat has, in most cases you do have to add those features. But the reason you keep, I am just speaking not on your behalf, but in most cases you keep it proprietary or open source it because the open source community doesn't need all of that. When I use a lot of open source, I don't need all those. So it could be Armory or VMware or whatever company. You can build those additional features that you sell to customers. So I don't see any harm in that kind of model at all. And that's as long as you maintain the core, you contribute to the core so that if somebody wants to take and build it, they should be able to build it.
Yeah, I think the thing is that there are also many open source projects that have a lot of users and don't have a very healthy community or a very large base of committers or contributors. And that works in certain instances. Like look at MuleSoft. There's not a big community around Mule. Most companies use MuleSoft. Or look at Cloud Foundry. Like most companies use PCF. Spinnaker is very special. I think it's a bit unique in the sense that because the infrastructure layer is innovating so quickly, we really at our core fundamentally believe that it's the community that's going to ensure that Spinnaker as an abstraction layer keeps up with the rapid innovation that's really just starting in the infrastructure layer. And so as a company that's betting its entire existence around Spinnaker, it's very important for us to ensure that there's an incredibly healthy community specifically for Spinnaker because of that very kind of like existential reason.
Yeah, to you, open source Spinnaker is the heart, and
That's right.
it has to remain that.
That's right.
Breeds confidence, and that breeds a lot of, where credibility that people
Yeah.
should be able to use it. I'm curious that, since you also help a lot of customers, to not have to worry about Spinnaker and move it, what are some of the pain points that you have seen that they come across that not only you're trying to solve, but since you're also a critical part of the Spinnaker community, you're also trying to bring those features, functionality into the project itself.
Yeah. So, man, I could speak for hours about this because Armory's number one core value is that we are obsessed with customer success. So we exist to help our customers, to help the world innovate faster. And there are a number of pain points that we see. So let me answer this question with a few specific examples. One is that because companies have been in data centers traditionally and now are just starting to move out, there could never be a platform for software delivery. There could only be tooling, so Chef, Puppet, Ansible, et cetera. Now that there are common endpoints, cloud targets that companies are starting to use that work the same way for all customers, now there can be a platform for the first time. And so Spinnaker is that platform. Spinnaker is that thing that is now possible that couldn't be done before. What that means is that most companies have built their own very brittle paths to production, kind of using spit, polish, and tape. They've been extending Jenkins. Jenkins is great as a build server, it does CI excellently, but you can Frankenstein Jenkins to do anything, and it's not opinionated. And this also means that there hasn't been a common path to production in many companies. So, for example, JP Chase just recently announced its support for Spinnaker, and that it's awarded to Armory its innovation award. And so, JPMC wants to be able to have all its developers having one golden path to production. Those are the kinds of things that are made possible by Spinnaker. So Spinnaker solves for I had to roll it myself because I didn't have the ability to use a platform problem. You can remove all that cruft and replace it with this modern platform. That's one thing that the open source project solves. But Spinnaker is also very hard to extend. It's a very beefy set of microservices. It's a dozen microservices. So this plugin framework is a great example of innovation that Armory is helping bring into the open source project to allow it to be more extensible. And it's also, we believe it's very good for Armory because then it allows us to execute against our long-term strategy to create integrations with the tooling that companies are already using. So it benefits the community, but it also benefits Armory and specifically Armory's customers in our long-term vision to automate and compress the SDLC.
If you look at Spinnaker's evolution, of course, everybody knows it started Netflix to solve their own problem, and then it has been kind of evolving. Yeah. And now, as new customers or new users are coming in, you are actually adding more layers to accommodate. Now, there are two challenges here. Number one is that you want people to be able to come to and use Spinnaker. At the same time, there should be a concern that new use cases may make it bloated. It may. So how do you ensure that while you enable new users to come, at the same time you don't lose focus?
Yeah. So there's really two big vectors from my perspective. One is being obsessed with customer success, so just really understanding what the pain points are. Customers will always know their pain. They won't know the solution. They'll think they know the solution. The trick is in listening to that pain and understanding how to craft a scalable solution that solves for that pain effectively. And so I think that's a way to not become bloated, is to really just be focused on solving real hair-on-fire problems that customers have. So that's one big piece of this. An example of that for Armory is this policy engine that we just announced. This gives companies the ability to have just a lot of sophistication around the way they craft and define and execute policy within their companies for their application developers. But more broadly, it's about the community. And community means that as people join the community, everybody comes with their own experiences, their own backgrounds, their own beliefs. Having a strong community means that you don't try to change those people to fit into what already exists. It means that you're able to accept those people in and enhance and deepen the community together. And so this is why Isaac's keynote this morning was just so impactful for me, because community is so important to Spinnaker. It is what makes Spinnaker special, and it is what allows Spinnaker to succeed. And just watching these 500 people here at the Hard Rock all just be so focused on the same thing, to take this, to bring this platform into the world in the same ways with the same values. I think that's the more macro, broader answer to how the project doesn't lose its direction.
thank you so much for talking today and also explaining, what is the role, because it's ecosystem,
Yeah.
it's not one player, they all make a project successful. And I actually look forward to seeing you again in future, because I'm pretty sure that not only Spinnaker is growing, the Spinnaker Summit is also going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes. I'll mention one last thing, which is at Armory, we're really focused on building an open source culture and living these values ourselves so that we can help productize them and platform them into this project. And I really believe that the culture that we're building in the project and the culture that Armory is building and the actual platform, they're just two flip sides of a coin. So there's a head of culture and leadership development, Kate, that hopefully you'll get the chance to speak to. They can speak to that more. But if anybody wants to hear more about that cultural aspect, that's another thing that I'm very passionate about. And thank you for helping tell this story about this project and these people that are innovating on it. I hope you can come to every summit and just observe and track our growth and help tell the world about it. So thank you for taking the time to do it, Swap. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me here.
Awesome.